Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Collette Spagnolo. I lead marketing analytics globally at DoubleVerify, based in our global headquarters here in New York, and it is so great to be here today. I'd like to start by welcoming everyone to our 2023 Global Insights Report webinar. Our mission here at DV is to make digital advertising stronger, safer, and more secure. And transparency and thought leadership are both critical to this mission, which is why we are all here today. Our Global Insights Report provides advertisers with an in-depth market-by-market analysis that spans APAC, EMEA, LATAM, and North America to help inform digital advertising strategies. This is actually our 7th annual Global Insights Report, and our findings have become more and more robust each year. This year, our very talented analytics team looked at media quality and performance trends from 5.5 trillion media transactions, over 1,000 customers in nearly 100 countries. But today's focus is, of course, on EMEA, which covers Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I'll be taking us through the findings from the report with specific insights from EMEA, and then a fireside chat with our panelists will follow. Before we start the presentation, though, let me first have our panelists, Michael and Alex, introduce themselves. We'll start with Michael.
Thanks, Collette. Yes, hello, my name is Michael Brown. I'm a Senior Group Director at DoubleVerify, 4 years at DV and a scary 15 years in the industry. Previous to DV, I was at the likes of Pixability and Teeds. My main job role is basically to drive partnership with agencies and brands in order to be able to utilize and get the best out of DV technology.
Cool. Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Alex Thomas. I'm Director of Brand Safety and Responsible Investment at GroupM, specifically covering the EMEA region. My work kind of primarily involves working with our brands, our partners, our platforms to kind of mitigate as much risk as possible and to kind of address brand and user safety concerns that come through with media buying opportunities. I've been at GroupM for just coming up to 2 years, and prior to that, my background was kind of primarily in the programmatic and verification space. So yeah.
Great. Looking forward to our discussion later. Thank you, guys. A little housekeeping for the audience. We welcome you to ask questions in the Zoom Q&A box throughout the session. We also do have some time set aside at the end of our panel for questions, and we'll review the Q&A then. If you're interested in downloading the full report, and I hope you are, it will be available starting this Thursday, May 18th, and we will send the report link to everyone who registered for today's webinar. With all that said, let's get into it. So this year's Global Insights Report explores 3 key themes. First, always on. That's about the state of media quality for protected and unprotected advertisers and why it's so important to ensure that verification is always on. Second is verify everywhere. And this is the importance of verifying all media across all channels. Third, but definitely last not least, impact everywhere, which is how quality creates the right foundation for performance and attention. In many ways, verification is like a security system, and security systems offer protection in 3 key ways. First, they act as a deterrent. Second, they sound an alarm in the event of an emergency. And third, they monitor and record activity. A holistic verification system operates quite similarly. Pre-bid activation avoids quality violations before they even happen. Post-bid blocking and filtering halts ad delivery in unacceptable environments. And the monitoring process documents and reports activity, and that can be used to inform planning and optimization for advertisers. So this might sound very obvious, but you need your security system to be on in order for it to work, right? The very same goes for verification. For advertisers to achieve the full protection of a verification system, that system must be always on, and it must be turned on everywhere. And it's important to keep your verification on and running so that it can provide a foundation of media quality. Before we jump into our findings, we're going to launch a quick poll here. I'm curious from the audience, do you think that the state of quality improved, declined, or remained the same over the past year? We'll give everyone a second to respond. I love this. Okay, so you can see that the majority of the audience thinks that media quality improved over the last year, but we have a decent amount, about 24% that say that it declined. So let's actually find out. On a global scale, the results are very positive. Our benchmark brand suitability violation rate has remained at 7.1% for the second year in a row. We saw post-bid fraud and sophisticated invalid traffic, or SIVT, decrease for the third consecutive year, but the total number of fraud schemes actually doubled from 2020 to 2022, meaning while pre-bid fraud protections certainly do mitigate the damage that fraudsters can do, the protections don't stop them from concocting new schemes that are aimed at siphoning ad spend. For viewability, from 2019 to 2022, our viewable rates have consistently increased. Our display viewable rate is at 69%, and the video viewable rate is even higher at 74%, which is comfortably above the IAB's recommended threshold of 70%. So, all this together, brand suitability, fraud, and viewability seem to be stabilizing or improving. And these positive changes are primarily driven by enhanced pre-bid protections, including authentic brand suitability. So that's what's happening globally, but what about EMEA trends? The answer is nuanced. If we look within the EMEA region, we see that the quality of media varies greatly from country to country. At 10.6%, EMEA had one of the highest brand suitability rates globally, and this has increased by 13% year over year. That very increase was largely driven by Poland, where brand suitability violations spiked 70% in 2022, and that's impacted by regional instability. On a positive note, though, Germany's measurement rate for video viewability nearly doubled in 2022. Despite misconceptions about video measurement challenges in the market, they are actually now on par with the US when it comes to video viewability measurement. Italy also saw improvements with a 26% display viewability increase, primarily driven by mobile web inventory. So what all of this tells us is that there are very many local nuances that impact quality, and that is why keeping verification in place in all these places is so critical. So the data we've discussed so far has been what we saw post-bid for protected or managed DV advertisers. But we wanted to get a look under the hood and see what the data would show for unprotected advertisers. So DV ran a test campaign with no protections in place, and we will refer to this as the unmanaged campaign. The results from the unmanaged campaign provided transparency into media quality when verification is not in use. In other words, the cost of doing nothing. So what happened on that campaign? We saw 367% more fraud than on managed campaigns. And on peak days, the fraud rate for that unmanaged campaign spiked to nearly 25%, meaning on those days, 1 out of every 4 impressions was wasted on fraud. The unmanaged campaign's viewability was also significantly worse than managed campaigns. Video viewability, in particular, was 42% lower, which demonstrates the necessity of measuring and optimizing to viewability. And lastly, the unmanaged campaign had a 94% higher brand suitability violation rate versus our managed campaigns, which represents a real risk to unmanaged advertisers. So, a question that must be on everyone's mind is, how much do those violations actually cost? So we ran an assessment on that test campaign to estimate how much it stood to lose for every billion impressions served. And the potential loss is substantial. This slide shows the estimated US dollars lost per billion impressions on the unmanaged campaign relative to fraud, viewability, and brand suitability. When you don't have protection in place throughout the media transaction, impressions, and of course, ad dollars go to waste. So it is very important for your verification strategy to adapt as your media strategy evolves. Going back to that example of the security system, if you put an addition on your house and you didn't add a camera in that new space, you've just opened up a hole in your protection. This very philosophy also applies to your verification system. An always-on strategy has to extend to all the places where people consume media and therefore where they see ads. Social, CTV, audio, and more, all these platforms present new ways for advertisers to engage with audiences. But these channels are not immune to quality concerns, not least because they often perform so differently from other media types. For example, in social, TikTok boasts extremely strong audibility with 97% of impressions serving with sound on. In audio, one fraud scheme we tracked this year, called BeatSting, targeted audio platforms and was siphoning over $1 million a month from advertisers. And when buying from retail media networks, advertisers might be surprised to learn their ads don't always show up on that retailer's sites. In fact, audience extension placements are very prevalent in this space, and that has reach benefits for advertisers. But those very benefits come with a mixed bag of concerning and good quality. We see 129% higher violation rate, things like fraud and brand suitability, but also a 91% higher viewable rate when compared to the retailer sites directly. Insights like these help advertisers understand how to best leverage these channels, and they provide an apples-to-apples comparison with their other media placements. Now, those are just 3 examples. You can imagine how this extends to all the nuanced, new, emerging, exciting new platforms for advertisers. And one of those platforms is, of course, connected TV. An increase in streaming subscriptions is fueling CTV's ascent globally. As CTV becomes a top channel for both consumers and advertisers, measurement and protection are also becoming increasingly important because with growth comes growing pains. First, the growth. CTV verification and measurement was up 62% globally year over year. And in EMEA, that growth was even more striking. In the UK, CTV impressions were up 252% versus just 1 year ago. But then the growing pains. Our unmanaged campaign had over 1,700% more fraud, 1,700% versus managed campaigns. This makes sense because the DV Fraud Lab caught 3 times as many CTV schemes in 2022 versus just 2 years ago. So throughout this presentation, our data has been making the case for quality verification across all platforms. And coming back to our security system example, with a security system in place, you have a safe environment where you are comfortable investing in making improvements to your home. And in the case of media buying, we're talking here about investing more in capturing attention and driving performance. So, attention enables advertisers to optimize campaign performance and increase their return on ad spend. When buying media, you should consider both exposure and engagement to fully maximize your ad's impact. DV Authentic Attention is a privacy-friendly solution that provides impression-level insights at scale. Authentic Attention analyzes over 50 data points, both on how an ad is presented and how a user interacts with the ad or device. And together, this measures campaign effectiveness, which can refine media planning and improve performance for advertisers. Our report this year takes a deep dive into attention, so let's look at 2 of the key factors that drive performance. First, choosing the right ad placement. This requires specific insights about how those placements drive performance. You would think that advertisers would prioritize the domains that drive the highest attention, but that is not always the case, as this graph shows. A high volume of domains are actually lower performing, that's the pink and yellow bars. But there is still a huge opportunity to capture attention by focusing on domains that do drive higher exposure and engagement, which would be the bars on the right in green. What else matters? Just like in real estate, location is key. And EMEA as a region is actually leading the globe when it comes to attention. Placements in EMEA rank higher for attention, capturing exposure and engagement across both display and video. Past research by DV has shown that long-tail domains can drive outsized attention, and also that EMEA tends to have more long tail than other regions, in particular when we're looking at the US versus EMEA. And this can help explain the performance, but more importantly, why where you buy matters. So these are our main trends that we cover in our upcoming Global Insights report. And now let's bring Michael and Alex back to discuss these trends and what they might mean for EMEA advertisers. Let's start by getting an understanding of the ad verification landscape across EMEA by talking through the always-on trends that we've found within the region. My first question is for you, Alex. Overall, you can see that post-bid quality continues to improve. And essentially what this means is that protected advertisers are benefiting from implementing verification strategies. I'd love to hear from you how you have made this an imperative at groupM.
Sure, thank you, Collette. So yeah, ultimately, so the use of verification plays a kind of very important role in the work that we do when we kind of aim to mitigate the risk online. As is kind of alluded to within your presentation, no kind of two environments are the same, and verification can look very different across all of these. However, having that kind of independent and accredited verification and measurement, both from a pre-bid and a post-bid perspective, are really key for us in terms of managing adjacency, providing measurement, and which kind of leads to that increased efficiency. What's also been really valuable and kind of forms part of a big part of the verification strategies is that we've seen kind of significant advancements in verification across platforms, kind of social platforms. If we think of the different capabilities that are kind of have been developed, if we think around kind of sentiment analysis and those kind of product developments there, and then kind of as you touched upon emerging environments such as CTV, all of this kind of comes together to kind of mean that verification plays a really much bigger role in our campaign strategy. And then ultimately it's about using verification in tandem with other best practices to kind of measure and enhance the media quality across campaigns.
That's great. And across campaigns, so we sometimes get questions from advertisers about whether they can use a sample or whether they can or should turn verification off at certain times where they're more comfortable. So I would love to hear your POV. How do you advise clients when they ask this question?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I really liked your analogy of a security system. I think from a protection point of view, we know that kind of no 2 days are the same when it kind of comes to different content or different environments online that might not be safe or suitable to a particular brand. So I would say kind of verification kind of plays a really key role in making sure that that risk is mitigated at all times as much as possible. I think then from another angle, it's kind of looking at it from I suppose, an optimization, a hygiene and kind of performance point of view, and that kind of continuity of measurement and data at all times across all environments and all channels where it's available really is vital. And I think without that base or that foundation, I think you said, it becomes much more challenging to kind of use the verification data that's so powerful to kind of make those informed decisions, either on I suppose a macro level in terms of guiding investment, or on a more micro level of day-to-day kind of campaign optimizations, I suppose.
Yeah. So Michael, ensuring coverage across all those channels, across all those formats, and across all times, right, is definitely critical based on our findings from this report. So how do advertisers, thinking specifically about like big global advertisers, how do they make this something that is consistent across all of their media buys? I'm thinking across different regions, different markets at that micro level that Alex was just talking about, different LOBs, brands, even different agencies, right? Like, how do advertisers approach that?
It's a great question. I think when building strategy, global guidelines have to be established. They need to be established. I think when you define minimum standards for media quality, but then you set guardrails that allow for nuances in areas like brand suitability, which of course is not binary by region or by country. I think the key is consistency across all regions and LOBs. And once that baseline standard has been established and applied across all channels and formats, this would make benchmarking and performance analysis much more meaningful, much more insightful, and ultimately actionable.
Yeah, very much related to that. You know, we like to say at DV that we cannot treat brand safety and suitability as a one-size-fits-all approach. So I'm going to ask both of you this question. What are some criteria that advertisers should be considering when they're crafting their strategy, specifically to make sure that they're maximizing protection without compromising scale? It's always part of our conversation. Alex, let's start with you.
Sure. So the first thing to say is I think I completely agree in the sense that brand safety and suitability really kind of does require that nuanced approach, whether that's for different brands or in some cases kind of different regions. And it's definitely not a case that it's kind of one size fits all. Broadly speaking, it's essentially about working with brands to evaluate how their brand values and how their risk tolerance and their risk sensitivities then translate into kind of the media placements that are buying and the kind of day-to-day tactics that you're deploying across those campaigns. What's really helped with these conversations in the industry is kind of the industry standardization when it comes to kind of consistent definitions and languages when talking about harmful content online. So by that, I mean the Global Alliance for Responsible Media's brand safety and suitability framework. It's really difficult to kind of manage a problem without kind of having these kind of common language and common definitions of what the problem is that you're trying to address. For those that might not be familiar with the framework, very, very broadly speaking, it's essentially a framework which essentially creates a common understanding of what harmful and sensitive content might be via kind of different content categories. So this could be illegal drugs or crime as some examples. And then it creates a kind of common way of differentiating between different risk levels for that kind of content. So this is expressed through the brand safety floor and suitability. Essentially floor, the way we kind of decide, or the way that it's defined is brand safety floor is essentially content that should never be monetized. And this is where no brand would feel comfortable running against. And then you have brand suitability, and that's really where that brand nuance is really important. So there might be some content that is suitable for one brand, but might not be so suitable for another. And that's where that different risk thresholds, high, medium, and low, are really important to leverage and to kind of really understand with your clients exactly where they sit across that and across the different categories. It's very difficult to kind of create that consistency in your strategy until you really know what media as a brand you're kind of comfortable appearing with. And getting this right is kind of really key to maximizing the protection of content that might not be safe or suitable, but also in kind of ensuring minimize wastage and kind of increase efficiency. So yeah, it's kind of really key to understand exactly how this translates into the verification protection that you have in the different environments as well.
That's a pretty comprehensive answer, but Michael, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, it's difficult to add to that, really. I thought that was a good answer, Alex. I mean, I think from the DV perspective, you know, implementing brand safety and suitability is really a combination of understanding what's universally unsafe and what's specifically unsuitable to any given advertiser. You know, every brand has its own moral compass when it comes to suitability. Gaming is always a great example, right? What's right for some brands is wrong for others. So I think, you know, as Alex said, establishing that brand safety floor is absolutely imperative. GARM as kind of an industry-wide clear definition is a really good place to start. And then granular suitability settings, in addition to your brand safety floor, really allows you for that moral compass to be specific to each brand. And this will allow brands to deliver efficiency and kind of comprehensive protection across all media buys without sacrificing that all-important scale. And lastly, I think the only thing I would add is a really clear, specific strategy around news. You know, it's such a challenging environment with a fast-moving news cycle, particularly in EMEA at the moment, but it can deliver scale and, importantly, really supports quality journalism, something that DV absolutely stand for. But I think, you know, just advice really would be to talk to your verification provider about steps that could be taken to avoid some, but not all of categories that are in and around the news cycle. COVID and Ukraine, for instance, are a great example of that.
Yeah, so important. So let's talk about what we're hearing from clients. Alex, what are some of the factors that brands are actually most concerned about when it comes to brand safety, and maybe more specifically brand suitability? And in particular, what effect do you think that larger efforts in Europe, such as the Digital Services Act, will have on advertisers' comfort level looking to the future?
Yeah, so I could talk for ages on this one, but I'll try to keep it distinct. So I think when it comes to kind of the overall, I suppose, increased regulation, so you've mentioned Digital Services Act, but other areas such as kind of the DMA or the Digital Marketing Act, which kind of goes hand in hand, or if we're thinking about the UK specifically in terms of the online safety bill, as an example, kind of given the kind of continuing brand safety challenges that were kind of being faced, and I suppose the kind of larger social responsibility debate that's going on as well. I think all advancements towards kind of faster removal of illegal content or increased transparency in the ecosystem are most definitely welcome. Kind of zooming in a little bit more, I suppose there's kind of also some kind of more granular regulation. So if we think of HFSS as one example, high fat, sugar and salt, there's definitely this kind of a key area of focus for some of our brands to kind of make sure that they adhere to these guidelines, kind of regardless of where they're running their campaigns. Changing lanes slightly, I suppose, and to kind of talk about, I suppose, some other kind of concerns and kind of questions that I'm being asked when it comes to sort of emerging technologies. A great area of focus at the moment is around AI and generative AI, and specifically not just for brand safety and quality, but broadly speaking in the industry. One major use of AI is to kind of obviously identify, modify kind of content, produce new content via kind of machine automation, whether this is kind of text or images or videos and so on. I think obviously what this means is that the creation of all types of content is easier than ever. This is very exciting in many respects, but it's also kind of important to kind of be aware of the challenges that this might face. I think for advertisers, it's clear how generative AI can kind of potentially pose a risk in terms of content creation, copyright, misinformation, but we're also seeing how AI can kind of be so critical to combating this challenge as well, when it comes to leveraging that through brand safety technology and kind of adding that much needed scalability to human review. So yeah, that's just one of kind of the questions that I kind of get asked.
Yeah, we're hearing that too, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? But let's shift gears a little bit into fraud. So we spoke a little bit. We're starting to get into emerging technologies. So, Alex, as CTV specifically grows in EMEA from a consumption point of view, are you concerned about fraudsters exploiting that premium ad spend, especially for advertisers who might not be protected in all markets or all environments? And of course, given that CTV in Europe is generally controlled more so by traditional broadcasters versus a market like the US, do your clients even consider quality to be a concern, or are they a little bit more comfortable there?
Yeah, no, I think so. As you say, kind of CTV and the broadcasting space is kind of traditionally high quality, kind of premium environments, which in some respects certainly kind of eases some of those concerns that exist. However, kind of to use your phrase, the double-edged sword, this kind of these premium environments, obviously, and the pace of growth that we've seen in advertising revenue that's associated with these kind of environments inevitably ends up attracting and the fraudsters, right? In the end, for them, it's about kind of following the CPM. So I think adding to this, CTV and the broadcasters and that kind of, as you mentioned, how it's kind of works within EMEA, well, globally, but within EMEA particularly, is it's very fragmented, right? And in terms of the ecosystem, there's also kind of, without going too into the weeds, kind of different ad serving methods that kind of open the door for kind of potential fraud. And I think, forgive me if I misquoted, but the stat that you gave on unprotected advertisers experiencing, I think it was 1,760 or so % more fraud in these areas kind of illustrates that, right? And I think that's why the kind of continued development and adoption of industry measurement standards, so the kind of OMSDK is one example, and the kind of the continued advancement of verification protection in this space is really key.
And protection is key, right? So Michael, let's talk about that protection. Can you explain how exactly DV in particular protects clients in CTV environments?
Sure. I mean, I saw a horrendous stat from recent data that we saw, is that 1 in 3 ads were served into environments that fire ads when the TV is turned off. it really goes against the grain of thinking that all CTV is viewable and premium and good to go, so to speak. So there's really two ways that DV have kind of harnessed their technology to protect advertisers within a CTV environment. The main one being fraud. As Alex said, fraudsters are going where the money is, going where those high CPMs are, and fraudulent apps and spoofing. We tend to really lean into machine learning. We utilize both machine learning and human analysis to analyze, identify, and eliminate CTV fraud. We are seeing a massive increase, as the data suggested, in terms of CTV fraud in itself. And then DV has also developed that first sort of scalable solution for CTV viewability to protect advertisers against these kind of viewability challenges that we see in CTV as well. Viewability, I think, I'm kind of leaning into the next subject there as well. But, I think when you overlay the two of those things, viewability and fraud, we tend to see sort of quality benchmarks being able to be introduced for that kind of consistent protection.
Yeah, excellent segue. Thank you. So let's talk about measurement in viewability. So Alex, what has your experience been here, especially thinking about video viewability and that stat that I was talking about in terms of Germany now being on par with video measurement in the US? Is this kind of table stakes in EMEA now? Or does the entire market kind of need increased education on how video viewability can actually be measured? What's your take?
Yeah, no, I think, so I mean, I spend quite a lot of time looking at measured rate, and take it from me, it's definitely not the kind of world's most glamorous metric, but it really is an important one, I think, particularly for kind of, I know video is by far long gone from being an emerging format, but you'd be surprised when you potentially look at some environments that measurability isn't necessarily there. And it might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but obviously without that measurement in that environment, how can you determine the viewability or any other kind of metric for that matter? So I think on a broad level, what's really kind of helped with this kind of increased measurement is, to kind of reiterate my earlier point, is the kind of increased adoption of those measurement frameworks, whether that's the OMSDK for in-app or VPaid and for video specifically. And as you say, I think that stat around Germany's video viewability measured rate nearly doubling is a great kind of reflection of this. So to your question, I think the kind of best practices when it comes to optimization across video viewability are relatively well established. However, I think what we're kind of seeing is that it's increasingly important to make sure that measurability is also being a kind of a core component of the strategies, and I guess a kind of a first port of call in these, because as I said, without the measurement, you don't get the viewability. So it's certainly a prerequisite, and a lack of measurement can be a barrier to some brands investing in some environments. So any increase in measured rate is only a good thing.
Yeah, more transparency, right?
Exactly.
Great. Yeah. And I think it ties in really well with our security system motif earlier, right? In terms of that new house, even if or the new addition to the house rather, even if it's been there a while, if you still don't have the security system enabled there, you don't have a camera there, you still don't have full protection. You don't have transparency into what's happening in your own home, in your own media buys, right? Michael, does this align with kind of what you've seen across your clients in EMEA?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, I think we have a slightly different challenge with CTV in EMEA, and particularly in the UK as well. It's such an embryonic industry for us. We have some weird and wonderful licensing laws when it comes to content in the UK that's very different. However, it's growing and growing very, very quickly and likely to become very, very dominant over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. We see the need for protection, absolutely. Clients and agencies are constantly asking us to push the envelope, to push the boundaries on that. And out of our kind of key pillars, as it were, viewability and fraud are the ones that are inherently available at the moment. And I think the best that we can offer in EMEA at the moment is, as I said, the layering of the two quality scores, really, the viewability score and the fraud score. When you have a guaranteed human seeing eyes in a premium environment, that can only be good for advertisers and lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, of course, you're referring back to our authentic ad, right? That DV has pioneered in the space. So let's talk about new platforms and new things coming up. I think despite post-bid quality stabilizing at a really macro level, it does seem as if every time there's a new platform, quality issues arise. There's something in the news and the headlines and the trades. We've certainly seen this with social media platforms and, of course, new and emerging areas like gaming, retail media networks. We're hearing from our clients every day about these. Alex, what keeps you up at night when it relates to quality, especially when we're thinking about these new and emerging channels, maybe ones that we haven't even thought of yet?
Yeah. So yeah, where to start? So I think the way I kind of always try and think about emerging channels is that, realistically speaking, the kind of core components or tenets, I suppose, of media quality do remain consistent across any channel. So I suppose in the simplest form, it's about control on where your ad appears, transparency into where your ad does appear, and then kind of having that verification, measurement, coverage across as many environments as possible. And obviously, that's very easy to say, but it's definitely more of a challenge in reality when it kind of comes to emerging environments. So if we take gaming as one example, and kind of I think whilst we have seen developments in gaming, let's take the IB intrinsic in-game measurement as one example, to kind of standardizing what measurement looks like in this space. There's still some kind of development that needs to be done. And obviously gaming, this very nature is very fragmented, right? You've kind of got console gaming and mobile and desktop, and CTV has an overlap with gaming as well. And not all of the kind of capabilities are kind of created equal, I suppose, in all of these environments. And as an extension of gaming, I suppose, live streaming is definitely an area that we're kind of increasingly look at. I think obviously truly live content does definitely create kind of unique considerations for brands when it comes to brand safety and to verification. Changing lanes, I suppose, a little bit. It's another really area that kind of looking a lot into, and it's kind of particularly pertinent, I suppose, to these emerging channels, is to think about what adjacency actually looks like. So as an example, if you take a kind of long form piece of audio or a 2-hour long live stream as one example, it's kind of understanding exactly where your ad actually appears within that content, right? As an example, if your ad is at the beginning of a podcast and the first 90% of that content is kind of deemed suitable, but then the very final topic that's discussed in that topic in that podcast may not be, does this mean your ad was adjacent to this content if it appeared right at the very start, if that makes sense? So I think that's kind of a space where industry work is happening to kind of standardize it. Also, I think finally, kind of if we think of audio, again, the technology that's really important for these environments, obviously, it sounds obvious to say, but kind of really needs to leverage language and sound rather than maybe some other environments where images and metadata and video kind of might take precedence in terms of the measurement. So yeah, lots to think about in all of those emerging channels, really. But the kind of, as I said, the kind of core principles just still remain, I think.
Yeah, just like the definition of even the ad and what you're buying as an advertiser is kind of fluid in this environment, right? As we just follow where consumers are and where they're, just consuming media. So Michael, let's talk about proprietary platforms. Can you speak to what we're hearing from clients as it relates to quality in proprietary platform?
Sure. I think the first challenge that advertisers and their agencies really face is a lack of clear definition. What's viewable in one platform is completely different in another. So the first thing that we're asked to do really, and something that DV's tech does really, really well, is the normalization of all data points. We can absolutely, apples for apples is the old adage, where we can show a set of data defined by different walled gardens and different proprietary platforms that actually normalizes that data, and it allows you a better level of insight and to be able to optimize accordingly. That's the main thing. The other thing, of course, is brand safety and brand suitability, and that consistent challenge of making sure that brands can navigate what can be user generated or content that is out of their control, and make sure that their placements are in content environments that is suitable for their brand.
So let's go beyond suitability though, and let's take some time to talk about attention. So attention is, I think we can agree, a bit of a buzzword in the industry right now, but we definitely see that it's being taken more seriously by brands, especially those who are looking for creative new ways to measure performance in a very privacy-friendly way. Alex, how does GroupM view attention, and what is its role in evaluating the efficacy of campaigns?
Sure. So I think the best place to start is to kind of, I suppose, create that distinction, and it might feel like an obvious one, but kind of create that distinction between viewability and attention, because I think sometimes there's can be some kind of confusion on exactly what the differences are between them. Broadly speaking, the kind of way that I try and think about it is viewability kind of provides an opportunity for a viewer to actually see an ad, but doesn't always necessarily provide the opportunity to know exactly how that user interacted or engaged with that particular ad around that particular piece of content. Attention metrics kind of enable advertisers to get that privacy friendly, and I think that's a really kind of key point to kind of call out as the privacy friendly as we kind of move away from cookies. That kind of privacy friendly data from ads that kind of reveal exposure and engagement, and I think that's kind of really valuable across different campaign types and different objectives as well, all the way from a planning stage all the way through to kind of the optimization standpoint as well. And I think we're increasingly seeing that there kind of can be clear indicators between attentions and outcomes. Obviously, attention's kind of a very complex sort of non-binary measurement signal, I suppose. And there's a lot that goes into it to kind of make it as accurate as possible. Having said that, I think there's definitely been progress on this front, but there's kind of isn't that one single kind of industry standard for what attention might look like yet, and we're certainly working towards it. But I think kind of without that maybe kind of clear definition and standardization, always struggle with that word, it's kind of tricky to kind of become a completely viable, I suppose, alternate to kind of currency and transaction across all channels as well.
Yeah, it's not viewability, right? It's
Exactly.
not where viewability is in terms of maturity.
Yeah.
So Michael, so there isn't yet an industry consensus on measuring the impact of attention on consumer behavior and business outcomes. So where do you see this heading?
I mean, it's already clear that attention does have an impact on consumer behavior and ultimately business outcomes. I think attention metrics cover a range of signals, including exposure and engagement, as we mentioned. And when they're harnessed, I think they really can maximize different campaign objectives like brand awareness, direct response KPIs, etc., really affecting that kind of upper, mid, and lower funnel performance. And that's the first kind of time we've been able to really measure those kind of metrics across one campaign. We found that exposure index correlates to branding KPIs. This is the data that we're seeing, such as brand awareness and favorability. And that the engagement index really correlates to direct response KPIs, such as conversions, the ultimate CPA goals. Also, while attention metrics vary at the moment across the industry, DV is actually backed by the MRC, right, the Media Ratings Council, and really to validate that our attention metrics meet industry standards. And as the industry adopts attention metrics, attention becomes a currency, really to understand the true impact of a brand's digital advertising efforts.
That's a great point. So let's kind of look to the future. Can you guys each tell us what innovations and trends do you see emerging, particularly in the fields of attention and quality measurement, but if you want to go more broad in advertising altogether, I think that's applicable as well. Alex, we'll start with you. Crystal ball time.
Yeah, sure. So yes, I mean, we've spoken a lot today about kind of brand safety, suitability, and quality, and of course, these areas remain as important as they've ever been. What we are seeing, though, increasingly is that kind of broader areas of, I suppose, media responsibility are kind of really key for us and our clients in the media planning and buying process. To kind of touch on a few of these broadly, I mean, we've seen the damage that kind of misinformation or disinformation can kind of do to societal trust in the kind of institutions. And we know that advertising can kind of play a really important role in sort of combating this trend. And to echo Michael's point earlier, we kind of doing a lot of work in the kind of space of supporting kind of credible, fact-based, responsible journalism and kind of funding responsible news. Also, as part of this work, it's vital to kind of ensure that there's increased opportunities for engagement with a diverse range of audiences, and to kind of make sure we're supporting media businesses that are kind of let's say owned by underrepresented groups and so on. Additionally, as kind of data collection and advertising kind of continues to accelerate, and the ability to kind of responsibly use this data becomes kind of even more crucial. And we definitely have a responsibility to kind of protect the data of our clients, our customers, our members, and our audiences. And I think this is kind of a whole nother topic in its own right, but we've definitely seen a really increased focus on sustainability initiatives, and obviously our role that we have as an agency to working towards kind of media decarbonisation across the supply chain. So yeah, there's lots there, and I think one kind of interesting thing that we're seeing is that it's kind of really important to understand the relationship between those areas as well. So as one example, obviously, making sure that you're kind of getting your brand safety and your suitability settings right is really important to making sure that you don't have a negative or unintended impact on reaching diverse voices or funding responsible journalism and news, just as one example. So yeah, they're different areas, but they certainly have a relationship to each other.
Yeah, all key topics with all of our, strategic customers over the last few months, and definitely looking forward to the future. Michael, what about you? What's your crystal ball say?
My crystal ball. There's a couple of things, I think, really. The first one would be staying on that theme of CTV. As that industry matures and ultimately as the adoption of verification technology becomes increased within CTV, I think we'll really move towards brand safety and brand suitability within CTV environments. I think given that kind of program level information for transparency on placements and quality control, much the same way that we get from linear TV at the moment, it will really allow brands and agencies to sit within a CTV environment with increased confidence of the placements that they're making and the outcomes that they'll generate. So that's the first. I think the second one, and the one that I'm really, really interested to see kind of mature over the next few years, is custom algorithms, and custom algorithms based on verification data sets. Taking post-bid insights to inform future buys. When we hear from the industry that the need for efficiency and automation, and that's something that we hear on a regular basis, that need for those two things, custom algorithms will really go a long way to drive those kind of key initiatives. And I think, DV are in quite a unique place there. Well, verification in general is in a unique place there, because we sit on a huge data pool. That can be really used to drive real-time business intelligence. And with algorithmic optimization, this can become scalable and actionable and really elevate campaign performance like never before. That's my crystal ball.
Great. I love where that ended off. Awesome. Well, I think that concludes our kind of fireside chat, but don't go anywhere yet, because we're going to take some Q&A from the audience, and we already have a bunch in the queue. But if you have any questions, audience, as we're going through this, please feel free to drop it in the chat. So first audience question is pretty straightforward, and that's how we're defining unmanaged campaigns. I could take that one. So no protections in place whatsoever, no pre-bid targeting, no settings that could have mitigated and prevented fraud, brand suitability, et cetera, from happening. No manual optimizations, no blocking, no filtering. So it's really what an unprotected advertiser who is going in blind actually would see on their campaigns. The next question kind of touches on something Alex was talking about, but I'm going to toss it to you, Michael. What about DV and sustainability? What do we support, or do we even measure anything related to suitability? Because it is a really common topic.
Sustainability within digital, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So we've recently partnered with Scope 3, and we are an independent verifier of carbon emissions within the digital media supply chain. What that allows people to do basically is draw an index of who is within their supply chain more or less efficient when it comes to carbon emissions. We obviously take that very independent stance, and we're very agnostic. We're a supplier of the data. What a brand or an agency chooses to do with that data is, of course, completely up to them. But we very much drive the transparency of that data and allow sort of actionable insights off the back of it.
You can't fix what you don't measure, right? Like that is the transparency. Everything always stems from transparency, I think, at DV. Great. Yeah, exactly. Alex, I'll throw this one to you. Someone wants to know, what are the best tools advertisers are using to protect their brands? Do you recommend using keywords, inclusion lists, exclusion lists, etc.?
No, happy to take that one. So I think, very broadly speaking, the best tools for advertisers kind of really depend on the environment that you're operating in. But as we kind of spoken about today, getting that consistency on those controls is kind of a really important aspect of that. On keywords specifically, I could kind of speak for ages on keywords, but they're, very broadly speaking, keywords do, whilst they kind of offer protection, there's definitely some limitations in terms of how that technology works and kind of the implications that it might have onto campaigns. So as a few examples, keywords obviously are a very binary tool when it kind of comes to brand safety, right? You add a word into your keyword list, and based on what that word is, the ad will kind of be blocked. And that word doesn't necessarily kind of have any negative connotations with it, and it doesn't take into kind of the account the kind of sentiment, I suppose, of the content that's actually you're being run against. So I think that's where, to my kind of earlier point, the kind of advancements that we've seen within contextual suitability, kind of really understanding the sentiment of the content that you're running on, it is kind of really helped us to kind of move strategies away from kind of necessarily kind of broad and blunt keyword lists. And as I said, what's really important is that capability is kind of available in as many environments as possible. Yeah, and I think obviously when it comes to kind of different platforms, if we think of it's about kind of having that control, that pre-bid controls that's available to kind of really help manage that adjacency. But then it's really important to have that post-bid control as well, so that you can, after the event, understand exactly what's happened and where your ad has appeared, and make the kind of optimizations or any changes accordingly, basically.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. Most CTV buys in Europe are done directly with broadcasters. So is quality really an issue here? What's the real story? Alex, I think you spoke on that a little bit earlier. So Michael, I would love to hear your take.
Sure. Broadcast quality VOD, BVOD as it's called, absolutely quality content, you know, that's undeniable. I think where the question mark is the environment that the content sits within, and its capability to be able to identify fraud, for instance, or whether or not the TV was on when those frauds or when those ads are auto playing. So it's not so much about the quality of the content that's under question. I think, you know, it's particularly in the UK, we're blessed with great quality BVOD content. It's the adoption of verification technology within the environments, and whether or not those environments are actually utilizing and harnessing our technology to offer the transparency that's always needed.
Great. I love this question. In what way are company values and initiatives being incorporated into brands' media strategies, and especially media planning? And are you seeing this becoming more important or more prominent? Alex, let's start with you, but Michael, I'm sure you have more to add.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the very short answer is like, most definitely we're to kind of, this is my point earlier, what we're really seeing is that the brand safety and suitability kind of strategy and framework that brands are using really is a reflection of that kind of company's values and their initiatives. And we're really being tasked, and rightly so, by our brands to kind of talk about some of those kind of broader areas of responsibility that I mentioned as well, to really kind of make sure that the kind of strategy and the planning and the opportunities are really there across those broader areas of responsibility as well, and to make sure that brands can reflect their kind of brand values into the media placements that they're buying, to make sure that's possible everywhere in every environment.
Michael, anything to add there?
Only that it's been really good to see that GroupM and DV are really, really closely aligned when it comes to this topic. We're working on initiatives right across the GroupM ecosystem, actually, and more recently with Xaxis particularly, just ensuring that we take their responsible investment framework, which covers a number of different really important topics, and it's completely aligned with how DV are approaching this subject as well. You know, I've seen GroupM really at the forefront when it comes to leading the charge on this kind of thing, and yeah, DV thoroughly support.
Driving the industry forward, right? Another audience question, I think that's probably our last one. Going back to news, how would you recommend that buyers navigate news publishers given the brand safety or suitability concerns that inherently come with them? Michael,
Sure.
You're nodding, so I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I touched on this earlier, right? It's a huge challenge, the fast-moving news cycle, particularly the last couple of years we've had in Europe with various different types of really big subjects, COVID and the Ukraine war for starters. You know, we also mentioned keyword strategies, and you know, DV's stance on keyword strategies has always been less is more. You know, I think keywords are incredibly inefficient. It is a blunt force trauma approach to brand safety. And our stance really leads into content categories, and context is king here. You know, understanding the nature of the page and the nature of what that page is about which is very much in line with context as a whole rather than a particular keyword, just allows you that greater kind of insight into whether or not that page fits into your brand suitability protocols. COVID was a fantastic one, and I know it's a much used example, but when it came to death rates or lack of PPR, for instance, PPE, there wasn't really a comfortable place for a brand to sit within in terms of that content. But top 5 workouts to do during lockdown, top 10 things to watch on Netflix while you're in lockdown is absolutely a comfortable environment. So it protects the brand, but most importantly, just as importantly as well, it allows you to support that quality journalism and not have ridiculous block rates that are media wastage for a brand and really damage what the newspaper publishers are trying to do. So yeah, long story, a little bit shorter, is come away from keywords, have a look at content, have a look at content categories, and again, work with your verification provider to make sure that you understand the capability that is out there.
Alex, what about you? Do you have anything to add in terms of best practices for buyers to navigate showing up on news when clients might be a little hesitant because of the concerns there?
Yeah, no, I think I would definitely echo kind of everything that Malcolm said in terms of understanding. It's really key to kind of understand the impact of the settings that you're putting into your campaign into reaching these areas. And I think that's why those standardized definitions of safety and suitability are really important, right? Not by absolutely no means is all news not safe or suitable. And I think another kind of really key area that we're kind of looking at is that it's not just necessarily the responsible thing for you to do, but it drives a lot of value as well, right? That's where kind of all the users, all users that potential brands are trying to go to these environments, right? And they kind of really drive kind of higher quality, higher attention in these environments as well. So it's not just about safety and suitability. It's kind of good from a performance aspect as well.
Yeah, a holistic approach always makes the most sense. Well, we are right at time, so I'll wrap up here. Huge thanks to you, Alex, and Michael as well for a fantastic discussion. I hope that everyone on the call enjoyed it as much as I did. Before we leave today, though, I just want to remind you again that our annual Global Insights Report will be released this Thursday, May 18th. So we had a little bit of a preview here, but in a couple of days, you can download it from our site. We'll also be sure to send you a copy as a follow-up to this webinar. The session has also been recorded, so it will be available to everyone who signed up for the webinar for viewing at a later date. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon and evening, and take care.